This program, of course, is presented by Pro Wrestling Illustrated, the most widely read, widely sold, and respected wrestling magazine in the world today.
This is the Pro Wrestling Illustrated Podcast. I'm your host, PWI senior writer Al Castle, back once again with my co-host, Brian Solomon. How's it going, Brian?
Very well, Al. Happy to be back here with you as always.
Yes, and joining us for the first time, somebody we wanted to have on for quite a while, PWI contributing writer, kind of our Italian correspondent, Frank Mandolini. How are you?
Yeah, I like this title of Italian correspondent for PWI.
for our huge Italian wrestling coverage.
It's very good to be here. Thank you guys for inviting me.
Lots to talk about with, of course, the PWI 500 on stands. We talked about it last time. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the feedback we've gotten. A lot of news to cover with comings and goings, both on the AEW side and the WWE side. And we've got also a pay-per-view coming up this weekend as we're recording this. Before we get to all that, Frank, let's get to know you a little bit better. How long have you been writing for PWI? How'd you come to write for PWI? What's some of your background?
Yeah, through my podcast, the Last Minute Wrestling Podcast, which is currently on hiatus, I had the chance to know Brian Solomon here, your co-host, and later Kevin McElvaney, the editor-in-chief of PWI. And it came up that I was a journalist. I work as a journalist and as a copywriter here in Italy. And I'm trained in also in English journalism because I studied in London. Therefore, it was a no-brainer just to try to see if we could do something together. And that's basically how I became the first ever Italian, born in Italy, to contribute for PWI, at least as far as we were able to dig on the archives.
Yeah, I think Matt Brock might have been from a small village in Ireland.
Yes, he changed his name. It was Brocco originally. It was an Ellis Island job. You know how it goes.
Yeah, Matt Brock contributed something to the PWI 500 back in the magazine for quite a while.
So you want to say I'm not the first one? You're taking the crown away from me.
What is the pro wrestling? Yeah, what is the pro wrestling scene in Italy? I mean, is it largely WWE? What's the penetration there of AEW, and how much is there original Italian wrestling going on there?
Original Italian wrestling, not so much. I would say just in the last 20 years, and just like around the area of Milan, which is the place where you can watch more wrestling shows, which happen like every 2 or 3 months, I would say, each year. And originally, wrestling came in Italy first, I think, through Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior. Actually, the Ultimate Warrior was way more famous here in Italy than Hogan was.
You Italian, get it.
The guys of my generation, I remember when we were like 5 years old, we remember the Ultimate Warrior and the little toys, the Hasbro toys, I think it was. And but then for a few years it was absolutely nothing. Then we had just a little bit of WCW. I remember Goldberg, like in 99/2000, but it was taken away from television again. Then wrestling was really booming here from like 2004 to 2007.
That's so interesting because that was kind of a down period here.
Oh, here was absolutely booming. In fact, in that same era, you had like Santino Marella, which debuted in Italy, in Milan, which was 2007. It was because of that, because it was a huge market, Italy, I think, at the time. But then complete darkness. And now with AEW is on the satellite television, which not many people reach, but it's still a big deal to be there. But it's not mainstream stuff at all.
When is the last time WWE's been in Italy?
I think they come at least once a year when they do like their WrestleMania revival tour immediately in April when they tour Europe. They come like probably once a year, like in Milan, and that's it.
Have you been able to go?
No, never.
Really? Yeah.
Yep.
Well, too bad.
Never been at the WWE show.
Yeah. I mean, being here in the Northeast, we talk about this sometimes, Brian. We're beyond spoiled that how much we get. I mean, I'm probably good with minimal effort to go to 6 to 10 WWE shows a year.
Well, I even remember when I was a kid, they were still coming to the Garden. I would say like 5 or 6 times a year, Madison Square Garden, and I would go to every one of those things. So yeah, I think they did. I think years ago, didn't they do a title change somewhere in Italy, or what am I thinking of?
Yeah, Nunzio won at the house show in Rome. He won the cruiserweight title.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah, in 2005, I think it was.
Okay, yeah. Every now and then they'll do one of those. I think in the 80s, I think they switched the women's title at a house show in Paris. Or they'll do that, they'll on one of their tours just to let the fans know, hey, anything can happen,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's where Sherry won the title, I think.
I think so. It was either her or maybe Rockin' Robin. One of those happened in Paris. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember that being in one of the old Coliseum videos. Anyhow, great having you on, Frank. Hopefully the connection is good enough. And ironically, like the connection problems is with the guy in New York, not with the person on the other side of the world. So I hope anyway, a lot to talk about, again, with all the comings and goings in AEW and WWE. Before that, let's talk a little bit about the PWI 500, the 31st. I always forget. I think it's the 31st edition. We started back in 91. And again, now people have had a few weeks to digest it. Brian, I'll ask you, what do you think the feedback has been? I think it's probably been largely positive. I mean, not as much controversy as the one I've heard this year come up some, outside of like Naito, which was just a mistake, is Will Ospreay, Will not being in the top 10.
Well, yeah, but you can't please everybody, because then you got one thing I kept hearing a lot of is, what the hell is Vikingo doing at number 5? That was a big one. Yeah. Or even Josh Alexander, and I think some of that is, sometimes it's not understanding the criteria. Sometimes it's people who, and this is just a statement of fact, people who simply don't watch as many different wrestling companies as a lot of us do, or at least follow them just because it's what we do in order to put this list together. So they don't have as much of an awareness maybe, but I think it's been a quieter year. I think this is something that I feel like is the reason why I thought, and because one thing everybody's saying is, oh, they clearly planned this Shield 1, 2, 3 thing. It's a marketing thing. And I'm like, no, I was there. I was in the group. I was the one who said, like, hey, guys, we have the Shield in the top 3 spots. I don't think we even planned to do that. So it was not planned. But the Rollins thing, I really thought we were going to get killed for that, and we didn't. And to me, I think that really speaks to the fact that I think a lot of people are actually on the same page of going, Roman Reigns never wrestles. He's got to work more. Like, I think people understood why we didn't have him at number 1, even though he is clearly the top star in pro wrestling today. He simply doesn't wrestle anymore. I mean, he's wrestled twice since WrestleMania. So, I think that's why I think we didn't get nearly as much pushback as I thought we were going to get.
Yeah, and it's become even more ridiculous. And maybe that's not the right word, but
it is the right word, because they're putting it out there like, oh, the long title reign, he's passing every milestone. The guy never wrestles. You could put the belt on me and have me sit home with it for 2 years and say, I'm the longest reigning champion. And, come on, it is ridiculous.
Yeah, kind of easy like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the problem is that, like, they're still trying to push the bloodline as this huge act. And it almost reminds me of like when they'd feature the NWO on WCW Saturday Night, and it was Stevie Ray and Bryan Adams or something. Right. And it's the B team. Very much it is a Solo and Jimmy Uso, who do great work, but I mean, they're neither Roman or even Jey Uso headlining a pay-per-view. And at least before there was a constant presence of Roman, if he wasn't wrestling that often, I feel like we never even see the guy now. I mean, he's just DOA. I mean, not D. I'm sorry.
They just
MIA.
But they announced his next appearance, apparently he's wrestling Sami Zayn on a house show sometime this month, I think towards the end of the month. And they were really touting it heavily because I guess it's like his first house show, I think, since he wrestled Sami Zayn.
He wrestled Rey Mysterio earlier in the year at a house show. I think that was one of his last defenses.
And he did have one against Sami Zayn after Elimination Chamber. And I think that's the last time. So this might be like his second house show appearance of the year or something like that.
Yeah.
See, that's my problem I've had with it. And I've said it before. It's not like I'm going, I'm not looking at it from the kayfabe point of view of he has to defend the title more, or, the idea is you have to give people their money's worth. Like, people are coming out to see WWE. They want to see you. You're the show. That's like coming out. They wanted to see John Cena. They wanted to see Stone Cold. They wanted to see Hulk Hogan. They put those guys out there. You got to give, paying customers their money's worth. And it just doesn't feel right to me at all.
That said, WWE's doing a huge business, including live business at shows with what they have. So, I guess who's to criticize if the reality is they do have a hot product that seems to be moving along just fine in all the metrics without Roman as a regular part of it. Cody's a big part of it. I imagine Cena being back is part of it, but they're doing fine. Frank, I'll ask you about it. I mean, what were your thoughts on Roman being as kind of elusive a figure as he is? And does it sour you on the WWE product that you don't see him at all?
Well, I guess that clearly the decision that has been made, not just now, but a few years ago, is just to make the brand important. So WWE is important, and you don't have a clear star. I don't have I'm not 100% sure of what I'm about to say, but I don't think that the average person on the street may or may not recognize Roman Reigns. So they may recognize John Cena, of course, for obvious reasons. But now, for us fans, we are in the bubble, and we perceive things differently. And I'm a romantic guy. I like to think that the champion should defend his title on every main event and stuff like that. But probably it's at least clearly to me from a marketing standpoint, the decision is that the brand sells itself, and it doesn't matter who's on the card. And lately we've been seeing, we saw AEW doing the same with Wembley show, but that was a little bit different in my opinion. But lately, the last two pay-per-views, I think the WWE did not announce a single match, or maybe just one match announced prior to the pay-per-view or something like that. So they know what they're doing if they do like this. So I think that's 100% a marketing choice, not much a wrestling choice.
No.
Yeah, it's definitely a different strategy, and it's a good point that Brian, you were just talking about kind of like the days of the old house show loops, and I watched some of those old tapes back, and week to week and month to month, it was about driving home this match. You'll get to see Hulk Hogan versus Sergeant Slaughter in a Desert Storm match, and that's what sold the tickets. And the last WWE house show that came around here that I got to go to about a month ago at the Nassau Coliseum, if they did announce a match, I'm not sure I was even aware of it, and they drew a really good house,
right.
And AEW drew 80,000 fans before they announced the single match. So really, I guess it's just a different time, a different strategy, and it looks like it's working.
It's a different type of fan, clearly, and it's very clear because even when you go to those shows, you can tell. And one thing that's always really illuminating, because a lot of times if I'm trying to find, because I report on house show results occasionally, and I'll search the hashtags on Twitter to see what's going on, because people will tweet WWE Boise or whatever if they're in Idaho and all that kind of thing. And the people that go and are the most excited, they made it into just basically a live event experience, like you're going to the circus. You can tell, they're not particularly, they don't care what matches they're going to see. They don't. They're going there to experience WWE. They've got the belt, they've got the T-shirt, the hat. They're going to buy things for their kids. It's a family experience. It is not like the old days where that crowd was packed in there to see like this guy wrestle this guy. It's just, at least on house shows, it's a very different thing. And the thing with Roman is weird now because, you know, he's not on house shows. He's barely even on television or pay-per-views now at this point. And it's this clearly now to me transparent thing where all they're going for is just having him hold it as long as possible. Maybe they're thinking of the Hogan record now, which is about a year away or less. And it's like they're at the point where they just kind of want to have their cake and eat it too. So the creation of the Seth Rollins title, that's what it was all about. It's like, well, we'd like to have a world champion on TV, but we don't want to have to take the title off of Roman. So what do? Well, we just make another one. Like everything is they're bending over backwards just to have him hold this belt as long as possible. At the point now where I'm just saying, like, why? Why is that so important right now above everything else? It's such a strange thing. But I think that's what it is. They just want to see how long they could keep it going for.
I think that's the other side of the coin. I mean, it's probably my perception is that the Bloodline saga has kind of jumped the shark. Maybe not totally, but we're getting there. And so, as you said before, I think it was Al that mentioned that they're putting the B team forward now in this moment, and probably they want to milk it as long as they can, and I'm pretty sure that they also don't want to depend on a singular star. I'm sure that when Austin left, it was a big problem backstage. When The Rock left, same, and stuff like that. So now they do not have to worry if Roman Reigns wants to, I don't know, join his cousin in Hollywood or stuff like that.
Yeah. I mean, I think it has died down. It's sort of like a lull right now. I do think the plan is to heat the bloodline back up, and clearly, again, they knew what they were doing when they put the title or created this title for Seth, because I don't think even fans could have anticipated that Roman would be as inactive as he is now. And, you know, it does start to create some resentment, I think, among fans. The flip side of that is, does it become that much bigger a deal? You know, and if he wrestles at, it's not even look like he's going to wrestle at Survivor Series, but the Rumble or Saudi Arabia or certainly Mania, if and when they do Cody and Roman at Mania, is that bigger a deal? Because now, you know, sort of like the Goldberg or the Brock Lesnar kind of special attraction, Roman Reigns has become that. It's crazy because he's the defending champion, but he is beyond the part-time player. He's never around. But you know, I hope the payoff is worth it. But real quick, we were plugging the magazine, the PWI 500. You can read about Roman, our number 2 this year. As we mentioned, Seth Rollins, number 1, Moxley, number 3, and 497 more in the issue. Pro Wrestling Illustrated got an extra, I think, 16 pages of content, tons of analysis, and just a really fun issue. Go to PWI online.com and check it out, subscribe, download it, whatever you like. We got combo packages now, so you could get both, and certainly in all cases a big discount over the cover price. Also, I'm reminded of flipping the magazine over, you could get some really cool back issues from our archives. So go over to PWI-online.com and check it out. How am I sounding to you guys?
Great.
Good.
Pretty good.
Right, good.
Pretty good.
We've had okay. So let's talk a little bit current events.
Oh, now you're muted.
We spoke too soon.
Yeah.
I made the mistake of moving my mic. And can you hear me now?
Yes.
All right. I don't know if I'm on the right mic though. Let's see. All right. Well, I'll plug it anyway. I'm sorry if maybe my audio quality is not. How do I sound audio wise?
Good. Very good.
Right now, okay.
All right. Let's move ahead. Adam Copeland, the former Edge, shows up at AEW Wrestle Dream last week. Kind of a surprise, even though I guess it had been discussed since his WWE contract ran out. But for a lot of people, myself included, it was just sort of like unthinkable, even though I guess it was technically a possibility. And even Edge kind of signaled that it wasn't out of the realm of possibility. I think something about this was surprising because it was like, really? You want to go to AEW? I mean, frankly, I think for a lot of people, they saw it as sort of a step down, a demotion for a guy. And that's not even necessarily meant as a slight towards AEW, but the reality that this guy was a giant in WWE and already a Hall of Famer, and, a guy who was held up as one of their top stars and legends. As people noted, the same night that Adam Copeland debuted on pay-per-view for AEW, WWE drew more people at a house show in California. So and Edge just came off of performing in front of 80,000 fans at WrestleMania. So I think for some people it was like, I think they're surprised that he would want to do this. But I think he's shared a little bit more since then. And it sounds like a guy who really loves wrestling, wants to wrestle some more, wants to have some matches that he's never had before, and is doing it for reasons that maybe fans wouldn't necessarily automatically connect with. But it sounds like his motivations are pure. And, where I'm at is good for you. Have some fun. What do you guys think?
What, Frank, you want to take that?
Oh yeah. My feeling is more or less the same. It's okay. He clearly wants to have some fun and some new, fresh matchups. That's okay. That's cool. He probably gets paid a lot of money, probably more than what WWE were willing to pay him at this stage. Because, to my understanding, there was a problem with the negotiation as well because of that. Because Edge is an established name, but probably it wasn't like the big draw that WWE hoped it would have been in this second run in the company. And they probably did not reach an agreement, or at least that's what I get from what has come out publicly. So, probably everyone involved is happy, and that's cool for them. However, seeing Edge in an AEW ring, it did not feel quite right to me. I don't know why. Probably it's because, as I mentioned earlier, I grew up during the Ruthless Aggression era, the so maligned Ruthless Aggression era. And in my eyes, Edge is like one level above what I saw when he came out. And it was like I don't know, a bigger star in a small pond or something like that. I don't want to disparage AEW, but that's the feeling I got. There was something clearly off during his debut.
Yeah, and it had nothing to do with him because I think he was amazing, and he's always a great promo. This was no exception. I thought the segment itself was great with him and Christian. I thought that was very cool, and just clearly this idea that I think, it's all eventually going to get to the Edge and Christian reunion kind of thing and do all that kind of stuff, but it's interesting to get there. But like you said, it's something different. I know a lot of people were pointing out that when he came out to do his entrance, his trademark entrance where he runs to both sides of the ramp, he only ran to one side of the ramp because there really aren't any people on the other side, on the hard camera side. But my understanding of what happened is that basically WWE wanted to kind of more kind of move him back into the legend status in the background. Legends contract, you're still with us, but we're not really you're not like a top guy, you're not gonna be like in the mix, and this is what we're gonna pay you. And I don't think that's what he wanted, and I think that's what it comes down to. And at AEW, we're gonna pay him more, they were gonna feature him prominently, they were gonna allow him to still be a top guy, and that's what he's trying to do, is to extend that. It's really interesting to me because it also shows a lot how the wrestler mentality has changed over the years. Because, I mean, look, I'm making assumptions here, but Edge has been a top guy for a really long time, and I'm assuming that he's made a lot of really good money in the business, and I'm further assuming that he's managed his money really well and he's doing okay. What I'm trying to say is I don't think Edge really needs money. So it's interesting to me how, like, I remember a time when wrestlers would work out ways to try to get paid without wrestling. Like they were always going on these Lloyds of London policies and faking injuries or milking injuries or trying to get acting jobs so that they didn't have to wrestle. You know, those guys were so much more carnies. And now you know, with fan wrestlers like Edge, who are, you know, they have more of the fan mentality. It's like they just love doing it, and they're going to keep doing it even when they don't need to do it, and even when they don't need the money. There's something admirable about that. I just hope that his health is okay, and that it's not one of these situations where, you know, they're just going to pay him, but maybe not be as responsible as WWE would be, because we all know WWE is also very, very cautious with medically clearing talent. So maybe that was part of it too. Like, you know, we're not 100% sure that you can still do this. But, you know, whatever the case, I think it's good to see people jump back and forth. I think that's what wrestling's all about. I don't subscribe to this tribe mentality, like you have to be with one company for your whole career. I think those are people that just maybe never really knew anything different other than one company in the wrestling business. So I think it's a good thing. It's a good thing for him. It's a good thing for AEW. So, you know, I'm letting it play out.
Yeah. I really do think Copeland's, and I got to get used to saying that, his motivations are pure. I really think he's thinking, well, before I retire, I'd love to have a match with Kenny Omega. I never worked with John Moxley. And, you know, there are all these really interesting matchups. And I think a lot of it probably is getting back together with his old buddy, Christian. As far as what it means for AEW, I'm not sure, you know, because I do think they already, you know, I just saw a poster for some event, and you see like the whole roster and who they're trying to feature. And that front line is Adam Copeland and I think it's Moxley and Bryan Danielson. I think Jericho's in there. And I think for the casual fan or even the non-casual fan, and you know, my kid walked into the room when Copeland was coming out. It just seems a little, I don't know, TNA 2010, you know, especially because the presentation is so WWE, right? I mean, they're calling him the rated R superstar, Adam Copeland.
Got the music
coming out with the same music. Yeah, all of it. And different even than Moxley or Bryan Danielson or all these other guys who came through WWE. They had reputations and careers and identities before they went to WWE, and then they kind of fleshed them out further and became bigger stars there. Edge is wholly a WWE product, right? I mean, this is really where he spent his entire career, and him going over to AEW with the exact same presentation, some of it, I don't know. I don't know what the word is, but it does feel, and given especially that he's in his 50s now and a terrific athlete, looks great. None of this is criticism, but AEW kind of going all in on a guy who so clearly is like, it reminds me of, you know, TNA 2010 and when they went all in on Hogan or Nash or these guys. I don't know. And again, if he was the only one, it would be one thing. But at this point, it really is like, if you used to work for WWE, come on over, you know?
Well,
yeah, I mean, that's probably why I said something was off as well, because he had the same presentation, as you said, same music, same entrance, same everything, but the environment was different. So probably that was one of the factors that made it a little bit weird. I don't know. You can also have John Cena enter with the same music and same T-shirts and stuff like that, but it will seem off. You know, that's probably what I meant earlier.
Yeah. I mean, and look, in as much as a putting on really great matches. I think he could put on really great matches. I mean, I think you put him in there with a Kenny Omega and they could do something really special. So that part of it, I totally get. I don't know how much it means in terms of business for them, how much of a needle mover Adam Copeland would be. You know, in terms of what it means for the company, I think it's at least a notch below Punk when they signed Punk.
Yes.
Probably in the range of Bryan Danielson, and maybe even a step below because Danielson's younger and you know, I think more adept at that style that AEW puts on. But I don't know. I think they got to tread carefully, especially because that roster is so huge and there's already like this long queue of guys waiting to get their break, and now putting in another former WWE guy at the front of the line in his 50s. They need to be careful, you know. But I'm not trying to be kind of a downer about it because it was a really cool moment. When I saw it, I got a kick out of it. You know, it's something special. Let me ask you guys this kind of related topic. What ultimately, I mean, from a news story, I know what the answer is, but in terms of a business move, what could mean more? Adam Copeland going to WWE or Jade Cargill coming over? I'm sorry, Adam Copeland going to AEW or Jade Cargill coming over to WWE?
I think it's Jade Cargill, and I think it's because of her potential. It's because she, you know, Edge is somebody who's on the way down in his career. Clearly, this is like you know, it's felt like an extended farewell tour for like 5 years, but with Jade, it's like she hasn't even gotten started yet, you know. And let me tell you, WWE is going to make sure that it's more impactful. You could already see, like, they are prepping her in a way that you almost never see. Like, I don't even think there was this much of a hullabaloo when they were getting Cody back. And I don't know if maybe that was because they were trying to keep it more of a secret for WrestleMania. I don't know. But I mean, they are ramping her up to the moon, to the point where, and it also shows a lot of, I don't know, it seems like they what's interesting to me, what I'm trying to say is very often WWE doesn't give the audience credit enough for knowing who people necessarily are. Like with Cody, there was a sense of, okay, well, at least he's been here before. And, you know, there's that we can build on that. And he was kind of like the guy in AEW, you know, from here and there. But with Jade, it's impressive to me because they're saying, like, we're not going to change her name. That's her name. We're going to make a big deal about it online because we know people are excited about this. Like, I think that's a really good, it's something you never see WWE do enough. And it's a really good way. Like, if you're getting somebody who, you know, take advantage of the reasons why you're bringing them in. Don't feel the need to have to start from scratch, pretend like they never existed before. You're losing some of the value of why you brought them in. So what I'm saying is they are going to make sure that this is a very big deal. And I think the WWE, I think she is tailor-made for we've said this for years, for the WWE product. Again, even some of her weaknesses, you know, you don't have to be the best worker in the world. They will work around you. They will make you look good. This is not the dream match company. You know what I mean? Like, this is the star company. This is where she belongs.
Yeah. And I think it's a feather in the cap in a weird way for AEW because it gives them credibility. I mean, this is the first that I can think of. Maybe there's some others that I'm not thinking of, but the real kind of first fully AEW created star.
Yes.
That WWE jumped on, signed, and is really showcasing. And what it tells you is that AEW can create a star, you know, and I think that's what they did here. And as much as WWE, you know, poo-poos any kind of like a claim that they look at AEW's competition, I think this all but proves it in that they're so kind of like braggadocious of, look, we got her from you. So it clearly is a big deal. But Frank, I got to say, like, and Jade's fine in the ring and has gotten better, but she's not Bianca Belair. She's not Charlotte. She's not Becky Lynch. She's still young in the business, but I do wonder, you know, is WWE putting too much stock in Jade? Is there a ceiling there that the reality, you know, is she more Goldberg than Steve Austin?
That's a nice way to put it. Probably she's more Goldberg, but there's no shame in that, in my opinion. I mean, she one I think one of the main values that Jade Cargill has is that she has a pretty good sports background, athletic background at high level. That means that she is coachable, probably. That's why we saw her immediately rise to this prominent level in AEW, which she wasn't ready probably for, but she had the look and she could learn on the job. And in WWE, they will have the best coaches looking out for her, right? And so I think that she can be a great star in the future. She already has the look, which is perfect for WWE. She's in the star company, as we said before, and if she has the will to train and to keep getting better, which I'm sure she does, she always appears to be a little bit too braggy on interviews and stuff like that. But her past speaks for herself. I mean, she has this level of coachability, of being coachable. And that is something that has to be taken into account, in my opinion. And
I think,
yeah, go ahead, Brian.
No, I was just going to say, I think that's interesting because it's very true. It almost sounds like a contradiction, but it's so true. It's like, AEW is the company that's more known for, putting together the dream matches and really thinking of like what's going to be the best kind of work rate match. But ironically, WWE has a far better track record of training and preparing talent. When the wrestlers there more, and this is a reason why their detractors don't like WWE, but the wrestlers there are more polished in their work than anywhere else, in my opinion.
Yes.
It doesn't always mean that they have the best kind of Meltzer style of 5-star matches and all that, but they are the most polished all around workers in the business. And so, they will get her to where they need her to be. I have no doubt about that because they're really good at that. Whereas AEW, it's more like they rely more on people coming in and already knowing how to do stuff and coming from the indie scene and working the indie style, people who are not, and look, I have contacts on the inside. I speak from knowledge, people who don't want to be coached. Okay, who aren't really interested in learning, who think that they know already. A lot of the rumors you hear about that are true. They just are. It's a place where people, they like to do their stuff that they want to do their way, and that can result sometimes in a sloppy kind of a product. Some fans enjoy that aspect, though. They like the indie-rific style of AEW with a big budget, right? It's like people say, it's like an indie with a giant budget. Some people love that. But I think, again, this is another reason why WWE is the better company for her. As we saw, she couldn't really thrive to where she needed to get to in a place like AEW. I mean, they were actively keeping her away from the main scene in the women's division, where it got to the point where you were like, what is Jade doing over there? Like, they're all over here. She's in a bubble over there. And we find out, like, I guess some of them didn't want to work with her, or who knows, there's a lot of politics going on. And now that she's going over there, it almost makes it even more glaring. You have this person who's clearly a star who is going to be in the mix, I have no doubt, in WWE. And it's going to cause a lot of people to ask, why the hell weren't they doing that with her in AEW? And I just don't know if it's the kind of place where they could get somebody like Jade Cargill to the point that she needs to be at.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's a good point you bring, that the difference might be the development, the training there. And I've never really heard of, I mean, I'm sure there's in AEW, they run through matches, what have you, but this is a huge part of WWE's business, is developmental and getting people ready. And sometimes WWE even gets flack about getting people who come over with some brand recognition and they send them to NXT. And sometimes I think it's the wrong call. In this case, and I don't know if she actually ever, appears on NXT, but clearly they're smart to want to give her more training, more development. Because, the reality is more than anything, I think what they're getting out of Jade is that incredible look, right? I mean, she looks like a superhero. She's and you know, if you could take that and get something out of it, it's worth it. I mean, and this is not, you know, some crazy thought. This was the Road Warriors, right? I mean, like guys with like an incredible look and marginal wrestling ability, and had, you know, maybe the most successful team ever. So
your pal, the Ultimate Warrior, the Ultimate Warrior, right?
Yeah,
it's true. A technician, if I ever saw one.
Absolutely.
But yeah, no, absolutely. It's like this is a formula that works, and yeah, I think WWE is sort of uniquely suited to spot that and then develop it. And it's not to say that she can't ever, you know, reach a certain level, but even if you could only get her part of the way there, she could be worth a ton of money. So they're smart to do it. Let's talk about some other comings and goings. These not as good news for anybody, because it's just people losing their jobs. And Brian, I think it was the last podcast that we talked a little bit about this when it was happening on the Office side, but then Hammer fell, and we did see a lot of releases on the talent side. Nobody earth-shattering. I mean, this wasn't like a few years ago when we saw Braun Strowman and Bray Wyatt, some top guys get released. I think, you know, the names that kind of like made people take notice were Dolph Ziggler and Mustafa Ali, and who am I forgetting? Shelton Benjamin to a lesser extent, Elias,
I thought, was, but they were all people who were not being really featured. They didn't take anybody who was like in the middle of a big program or you know, was doing something prominent on TV and just like disappear them. That didn't happen. They obviously, you know, they looked at this roster and they just literally said, who are the people that we can get rid of right now and it wouldn't really make a huge impact on the TV product. That's what they did. That is,
yeah, and I think it's also by and large people who were given opportunities, and lots of opportunities, right? So these aren't people that like, oh, but you never even got to see what this person could do, and maybe they didn't do enough to get this get the most out of them. But these were all people who we saw introduced and reintroduced and put in different storylines, so they did get a break, and you know, it just didn't work out. For me, the one that I was kind of most upset to see was Dolph Ziggler, just because, sort of like Edge, you know, a WWE lifer and a guy who I think has done so much for this company. He's a guy who you could always call on to fill a certain spot in a storyline or a roster and deliver. You know, last year they moved him over to NXT, and he was sort of the featured guy in NXT for a while, won the title, headlined their big show over WrestleMania, and always delivers in that. Crap, I've seen it cutting out. For whatever loyalty it's worth, it bothered me to see that a guy who was there for whatever's 20 years, and you saw some of the metrics that were out there about wrestling 1,200 matches or whatever, that he could just kind of be given the boot. Bothered me. I wish there was a way that they could keep him. And I guess there's some talk that maybe they are looking to find some role for him backstage or in an authority position, something like that, which I'd like to see. I also get that maybe after him being there that long, he's making a whole lot of money, and it's tough to justify that kind of salary for a guy who you're not getting that much product out of. But Ziggler's a guy who, you know, by WWE standards, I think it's like a WWE Hall of Famer. You know, I think he's had
Definitely.
that long of a career.
he had a great run. I mean, a great run. You can't, I mean, almost 20 years. You know, not everybody is going to be the main event. You know what I mean? That's not the metric for determining if you had a great run, in my opinion. He had an amazing run. Everything has to come to an end at some point. I'm not, you know, trying to be cold-hearted, but I mean, I don't think he has anything to complain about. Good God, like a 20-year run. I'm sure I hope he's like set financially like he should be, you know, if you take care of yourself and your money and stuff. And I mean, like, he's always going to find work. I mean, he's a guy that could pop up anywhere and command a decent price, I think, you know.
Absolutely. And I think that we just spoke about some wrestlers that, even though they weren't that good. They did good for themselves inside the wrestling business, right?
Yeah.
I think with Dolph Ziggler, we are on the opposite side of the spectrum here. I think he's always been too good. That was always his problem, because with a wrestler as good as Dolph Ziggler, he has been used always to put over like some shiny new toys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If I think like every newcomer that WWE had in the last, I don't know, 15 years or something, their first feud was always Dolph Ziggler. I remember when Shinsuke Nakamura debuted on the main roster immediately against Ziggler. When they gave the title to Dean Ambrose, the only time he won the WWE title, he went to SummerSlam and faced Dolph Ziggler. Which, I mean, if you want to make your like current prospect look good, you go against somebody like Dolph, because you're damn sure that he's gonna make you look good. And that was always his limit, at least in my eyes, that it was too good for his own good.
But that's okay to me. That was his role, and he was really good in it.
Oh, yeah.
So many times the guys, it's almost like a badge of honor. I gotta say, they trusted him. Like they knew, he was like in generations gone by, like somebody like a Johnny Rodz, who was like, people will laugh because he loses every match, but meanwhile he's the best damn worker they have on the roster. Like he was that type of a guy. Like he could work with anybody. He could make anybody look great. He was like, in a Shawn Michaels mold in a lot of ways.
Kurt Hennig, I hear a lot.
Yeah, Kurt Hennig.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
And I mean, you need guys like that. That was his role. You need guys that can really make everybody look like $1 million and you can count on, and they're reliable and they're really, really good. Not all, you don't want to have, you want to have some of your really good workers in those roles. Just do.
To me, what kind of his lasting legacy for me, and it's not the world titles he's won or what have you, but it was the SummerSlam program with Goldberg, somebody we brought up here a few times a few years ago, and like you bring in Goldberg has to be Goldberg, but also when you're putting him up against Brock Lesnar and those types, he can't always win. So he was kind of off of losing a few matches, and they were bringing him back once again. And it's like, look, we need Goldberg to get a win here. Who could we put him with? And they paired him with Ziggler, and it was perfect. And Ziggler sold like a champ for him. It was hilarious. They opened SummerSlam a few years ago, and remember, he speared him like his soul came out of his body, and then he pops after losing. He pops up, challenges him again. I wasn't ready. What have you? They do it again, and he does what he does best. He sells like a champ, and it was great. And Goldberg got his Goldberg moment, and and that's what Ziggler does, and he was fantastic at it. So kind of like in the mold of The Miz, but I think in some ways better than The Miz. I think a better worker than The Miz. Maybe not as good on the mic as The Miz, but maybe that's why those two have always kind of been very close. I think they share kind of a mentality, a philosophy of wrestling. But I mean, I hope whatever it is, I hope they find a way to keep him around in some capacity. I really like Dolph. I don't see him as a guy who could contribute that much to the product on the top, but and I get that this isn't a charity case. So if a guy who's been around 20 years is making a whole lot of money, it might be tough to justify. As far as other people, what do you guys think about Riddle? Another guy who for a while there seemed like on the fast track to superstardom, maybe got in his own way a lot and always came with a lot of baggage. And it sounds like maybe this was even less about budget cuts and more about WWE just kind of, giving up and having up to here with Riddle.
Yeah, I think the Riddle thing, right. I felt like the Riddle thing was something that even if there was no sale and there were no cuts happening, I think that one was happening. Like that was not even related to any kind of, I think that was just for cause. They just had enough with the guy. Look, I don't say this lightly. I don't say it a lot, but he was a mess. The guy was just a mess. And he just seemed like, I don't know, kind of a moron. I'm sorry to say this, but it almost seems like his gimmick was not that far from who he actually was. I mean, you hear some not good things. I mean, there was that debacle at the airport right before he got let go. Stories about, his family and his personal life, and just and then you think about like, well, what's the upside? Because we all know, in the business, like there's always that double standard, right? People get third, fourth, fifth chances if you're valuable enough. And I think it got to the point where they were just like, is this guy really worth it? What are we getting out of this? He's like an upper mid-carder. They tried to boost him up with the bloodline stuff. It didn't really take. I think they were taking a shot at trying to make him like a solid main eventer. And I think they just thought like, it's just not worth it. It's just we've had enough with this guy. That's all it came down to with him. I'm surprised it took that long, to be honest with you.
Yeah, and especially without Randy around, he really suffered because the team was over very much. There's no two ways about it. Team RKO. What do they call them? I forget.
RK Bro.
RK Bro. Right. They were hugely over. They really were. And Randy was having a good time. And I think Randy probably was saving Riddle's job for a long time because Randy was really enjoying that act. But Randy not around, and Riddle just being a pain, it sounds like. And what was more difficult was that all this baggage you're talking about, and the guy was ostensibly a babyface. And, not that WWE is necessarily that much these days in the business of like creating role models, but in as much as that inevitably is part of the job, he wasn't the greatest role model to have out there for kids and stuff like that. So, I just don't think, I don't think it was sustainable, and I guess they didn't think so either. Yeah. And Frank, any thoughts on Riddle getting the boot? I'm going to try to get some better Wi-Fi while you talk here.
Yeah. Simply, it was marginally, or at least rumored to be in so many difficult cases, difficult scenarios. Like, of course, his name popped up in Speaking Out and stuff like that. Apparently, nothing has ever been proved about what he did or did not do, but that was enough to make him look not particularly how should I put it? Not particularly interesting to me, at least, and I couldn't really like try to like him. Independently on whatever happened to him in storyline. RK Bro were over and stuff like that. But there was always like this shadow over him, at least in my eyes. And in the last week when he got paired up with Drew McIntyre, which is a guy that I like a lot and respect, and I had the chance to meet a few years ago when he was out of WWE. There was a very odd pairing, because if you've ever heard stories about Drew McIntyre, it was like the polar opposite of what you hear about Riddle. So the guy apparently has an heart of gold. He remembers the birthdays of everybody and he sends birthday wishes to everyone he knows. So this type of guy, and it wasn't. I think it wasn't a good fit to pair him with Riddle, and quite frankly, when I heard that it was out of the WWE, I was kind of relieved because of that.
It says a lot that even the UFC was relieved to get rid of him back in the day. Like there's comments from Dana White saying like good riddance, that kind of thing, or like we don't need him. And it's clear that this is a guy that just doesn't work well with others. I don't know what how best to describe it. He just doesn't he rubs a lot of people the wrong way. I'm also reminded of, not that this automatically makes him an awful person, but the kind of things you just don't see all the time. I remember there was that controversial thing he said about Goldberg. Do you guys remember that? Where he basically buried Goldberg. He had never even met the guy, and then like Goldberg confronted him, and it's actually on the Goldberg documentary that WWE made, the spontaneous moment where backstage at Mania or something, Goldberg confronted him and said something, and Goldberg came out looking like the baby face for sure. He said something like, because he was like shaking everybody's hand and nice to meet you finally, and he comes up to Riddle and he's like, it was a very real moment. He's like, I would have liked to have said nice to meet you or, get to know you, but I don't think I really want to do that. I think like that ship has sailed and I'm sorry. And Riddle had nothing to say, just completely dumbfounded and speechless, just completely embarrassed, looking at him like a fool. And I think it just speaks a lot to his character, like these so many of these stories that you see and hear. It's just, you just get a very bad sense. Yeah.
I don't know if you recall all the times that Riddle called out Brock Lesnar, saying that he will be the one to put Brock Lesnar into retirement. And of all the people that you want to nag, Brock Lesnar, of all the people,
right?
And apparently Brock responded in some ways on fashion. I don't know, probably in a backstage incident. He said something like, who the hell do you think you are? You never say my name again. We're not on the same level.
Right. Well, he says these bizarre things in these comments that come out, and you almost wonder like if he's under the influence of something when he's saying these things, which you couldn't imagine somebody in a stable state of mind is just going to decide to say or post on social media. Just bizarre things that he comes out with sometimes, for sure.
Yeah. And it's all a shame because once upon a time, and for a good reason, he really was looked at as one of these guys who were real prodigies, almost in a way like the Kurt Angle, because, he only came over to pro wrestling from MMA a few years back and really right out of the gate showed a real ability to do it and to entertain. But there was always this baggage that I think got in his way. I want to run through the other names and jump in if you want in terms of anybody who stands out. Mustafa Ali, I think he's a guy who people see as having a big upside, maybe more than others, in part because he's still young and motivated to do more. Riddick Moss, Mason Mansoor, Rick Boogs, the Hit Row guys who were let go, brought back, let go, and again now. Elias, who they have been high on at different times. Shelton Benjamin, another kind of a veteran, like certainly like Dolph Ziggler. Aaliyah, who lays claim to the fastest pinfall win in WWE history, I believe. Emma, another one who was let go, brought back. Dabba-Kato, who they've tried over the years, and because the guy's just so big. Dana Brooke, who's been around forever and never really got her footing. And
sorry if I interrupt, Al, but Dabba-Kato was a Raw Underground. Let's not forget that. Let's not forget that Raw Underground existed. It wasn't a fever dream that we all had during the pandemic.
One that I want to mention, and I don't know why it just sticks in my head, something about it is Hit Row. I find it to be so I don't know. And look, I've been watching wrestling a long time. I know that this is the way pushes go and programs go, but to see their trajectory is sad to me because when they were presented in NXT, they really had an it factor. They seemed like a really cool faction when Swerve was still with them, especially. They were positioned very strongly. I thought they needed work on the promos and things. I thought sometimes like the type of promos they were doing were not as cool as they seemed to think that they were sometimes, but they had a lot of potential and they came off like stars is what I'm trying to say. And then they just completely fizzled out to the point of becoming a joke. Like literally Top Dollar was a joke on television. I felt bad for the guy, the way they would just openly mock him. And I don't know. It just seems like maybe did Hunter see more in them than Vince did? I don't know what the story was there, but it seemed like they really could have been stars. And then, Swerve's doing great, but that faction just died. I don't know.
Yeah. How about you, Frank? Any of these names jump out in particular as maybe missed opportunities?
I've always been a big fan of Emma, and I'm also because of what she does outside of wrestling. She has a particular skin disease, and she's a big advocate for this kind of stuff that are like, invisible disabilities or something like that. And she does a lot of charity work because of that. And that I was always attracted to that. And I've always wanted her to do something bigger in WWE, as she did in Impact, for example. But that was never the case with her. And I'm sorry, because probably a program between Emma and Becky Lynch, for example, would have been great. They're both tremendous workers, and they could have done a lot more with her. But yeah, she was brought back for no particular purpose, and it showed.
Yeah. I mostly agree. Elias is one that I look at, and I can't tell you a good Elias match I ever saw, but the guy was entertaining, and I think fit that that part of WWE's kind of mission statement. I even got a kick out of the Ezekiel stuff, so I think what he did well. But again, I get that this isn't charity, and you can't just keep these guys around if they're not really contributing in a big way to the product. As far as what becomes of these guys, and this kind of goes back to the Edge conversation and AEW, starting to develop this reputation of if you worked for WWE, then we're interested. So, should AEW be jumping at all these guys, or are there some that are better fits than others? The one that to me kind of jumps out that, I could see that is Mustafa Ali. The others, I don't know. I could see like them bringing in Shelton Benjamin for some interesting matches. Maybe not like a contract guy, but a guy who could go in there and have some great matches with some guys. But beyond that, I mean, I don't see most of these guys as real good fits there.
Yeah, maybe like Emma for a Battle Royale or something like that in AEW. But I mostly agree with you. Probably Dolph Ziggler is the only one that you could see adapt to some situations. But yeah, out of all the names on the list, I'm not sure how many will be a good fit.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about Ziggler going there, I think that if I'm Tony Khan and, there's those stories that like we even mentioned here earlier of coaching issues in AEW and people not listening, or people just the culture there just being guys want to do their thing. If you want to have a coach that they will relate to and listen to and who could teach them a lot and that a lot of them probably respect the hell out of, he's the guy. And I mean, he's had a long career in the ring. That's something to really, really consider. That could be his role there. I think he'd be a tremendous coach for talent in AEW and really help people polish their style and stuff, and someone that they may actually listen to.
Yeah, because he could work the style that they're used to, right? I mean, he's not sort of like from a different generation. He kind of bridges those generations, and so he stayed in great shape.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think maybe he's kind of in between. There was some thought that was the role that they hoped that CM Punk would play, and clearly that didn't work out. And now there's some discussion of whether Edge is that guy, the veteran presence who is also kind of like the sensei in the back. But maybe Ziggler's a better fit for that. So we'll see. What's the situation with his brother over there? Because was he there and then he got in some fight with Punk and then he's not there? So, I mean, could you have like a Nemeth brothers tag team over there?
You could. I think the issue was that he had mouthed off to Punk, and Punk was like supposedly, although Punk denied this, but that he was keeping him off tapings like Collision and things like, don't let that guy, that guy, isn't wanted here, that kind of thing. But I think now that Punk's gone, I think it's a non-issue. He's, as far as I know, still with the company. And I mean, I don't think the world is clamoring for the Nemeth brothers tag team or anything like that. But I mean, he might want to go and be with his brother. I mean, especially
and maybe help develop his brother's career. It could be just something on the wish list. So we'll see. Okay,
well, we're not taking into consideration one fact.
What's that?
Now the door is open for a Spirit Squad reunion.
Who's out there? I know Mike Mondo still works some shows out here on Long Island. I saw a picture of him recently, and he was unrecognizable, Mikey. And isn't Kenny an agent in WWE?
Oh God,
I know he had been. I'm not sure if he still is. Yeah.
Who else is there?
The story about Kenny how Kenny Dykstra got his name? It's like,
Is it a Lenny Dykstra thing?
Yes, because Brian Gewirtz is a huge Mets fan, and he literally just said, "I'm going to name you after Lenny Dykstra," and he named him Kenny Dykstra. That's how he got the name, because Gewirtz was like the head booker, and he was a huge 80s Mets, like the Davey Johnson Mets. And boom, I'm surprised he didn't have like Solly Backman as his tag team partner or something like that.
Yeah. So real quick, we got to, again, I'm not sure when people are going to be hearing this, but there's a pay-per-view as we're recording this scheduled for Saturday, WWE Fastlane. I mean, they've had a few of these kind of off-brand pay-per-views, not the biggest in the world. Main event again, John Cena and LA Knight against Jim Uso and Solo Sikoa, I believe. A couple things I want to talk about this. First, LA Knight and now finally breaking into the main event scene. And Brian, we've talked a little bit about this. Certainly there are those who think this is the next guy, and others may be less convinced. How important an opportunity is this for him? And rubbing elbows with John Cena, what do you take even from that? I mean, this is a formula we've seen in wrestling in the past, kind of the endorsement, and that seems to be what the role they're having John Cena play here is, sort of like passing the torch, so to speak, to LA Knight. Can this work?
Yeah, I think it's great, and I'm glad they're doing it. He's worthy of it. I think his age is irrelevant, like we've said here before. So he's 40 years old. So what? He's not going to be on top for 10 years. Okay, great. You can get a few really great years out of him. Great. And people love him. And it's about time that WWE has had this reputation in recent years of they've stopped listening to fans. They've stopped listening to crowd reactions, and they've stopped caring about who's getting over organically, right? And he's a guy who got over organically. And you can't tell me, even though they've denied this, because for a while there, they seem to be really like holding back with him. You can't tell me that they weren't waiting for those contract negotiations to be over, because I think that they were. I think they knew his contract was up. I think they wanted to see what kind of a renewal they could get out of him, or if he even was going to resign, before they really went like full force pushing him. And now they are. And I think it's great. I think it reminds me of those days of like where the people like the Austins and the Bryan Danielsons, who would get over organically and they would go with it instead of trying to fight it. He's got it all. He's got everything you could want. I noticed it in him years ago. I'm sure a lot of people did, when he was Eli Drake, and when he was in, I think he was in TNA, right? And he was in the
Global
NWA,
Force.
right, Global Force. And I was like, this guy's a star. Like, even then, I said the same thing about Ricky Starks too. But I feel even more about LA Knight, because he got a little more experience. I can't understand, like, Kevin Nash is trying to, I guess, get headlines or whatever. He's been trashing him on his podcast. And one of the things that he criticizes is, well, he's like a knockoff of Austin and The Rock and all this. And I think, I mean, if you get over, you get over. Everybody borrows from everybody else. Like, who cares? That was like one of the things I noticed about him that I thought was great. I was like, this guy is like a combination of Steve Austin and The Rock. Like, he's taken, like, I knew that from the beginning. I thought that was a strength. So I love to see the LA Knight push. I hope they go crazy with him. I hope he's not there yet, but I could even see them getting him to the point where maybe he's the guy that beats Roman at some point. Could be. Yeah,
like this didn't happen in wrestling before. I mean, like,
right.
Hulk Hogan is literally superstar Billy Graham 2.0. Like, I mean, what's wrong with that?
Right. Ric Flair was Buddy Rogers. I mean, everybody is somebody, and you take what works. It's not like he's like some type of like a tribute act or something, Nope. You take what works and you go with it and you make it your own.
Yeah, I gotta say, I'm
Al's
and I
not
like
sold
the guy.
on this. Okay,
I'm not sold on it, and it's not that I don't like him. I like him. I really enjoyed him in the NWA, And I absolutely agree that if a guy organically gets over with fans, don't go against the tide, go with it, go with it, whatever it is. That said, I do get the reservations about the guy. I do think in a lot of ways the act is kind of derivative, it is, and a little dated, right? But it works, right? So, I mean, who am I to say? If it works, it works. But it does feel a little bit like a guy who came up in the Attitude Era. And I think maybe even more so than it was. I think he sort of moved toward those tendencies more than, I really enjoyed him in the NWA, but now I think it's become more about the catchphrases and the signature spots. And, but look, I enjoy it. I think it's fine. The age is a real concern. I mean, to have like the hot new thing be 40 years old is an issue, but it's not a reason not to do it. And 40 isn't 50, so you could ride this wave for a few years, but I don't know. I mean, I think. Well, look, you got 2 world titles, so there's plenty of main events to go around, I guess.
They could get a lot of mileage out of him. Like, he's not going to be a guy that's going to carry the company and for like a whole era, like a Cena type. I get that, but he's somebody you can get a lot of good TV out of, good matches, good programs, somebody that could be, I mean, look, even Austin himself was only, and this is partly because of injury, but was only the top guy for a handful of years.
Yeah.
And that worked. They got what they could get out of him. Why not, with somebody like him? I think like all the stuff you're talking about is exactly what WWE looks for in a wrestler. And I almost feel like that kind of is his gimmick, that he came in a time machine from the Attitude Era. But it works because it makes him stand out today. Because,
right.
If he was around, if he was doing this 25 years ago, he'd be like every other wrestler. And I think he would be lost in the shuffle. He'd be a mid-card act. But now that he's here, it's like, oh my God, you're not like anybody else right now. You are this throwback. And I think it's, like I said, I think it's a strength.
Let me ask you this. It's January and we're coming up on the Royal Rumble, and LA Knight is just growing hotter and hotter and hotter. And your WWE's plans are Cody and Roman at WrestleMania, but you can't deny that LA Knight is super hot, maybe even hotter than Cody. Do you shift plans? Does LA Knight jump the line? And to me, that's kind of unthinkable, and I think that's maybe where some of my reservations are, is that I feel I do worry. And again, there's 2 brands and 2 world titles, and they're not even on the same brand. So it shouldn't be that much of a concern. But LA Knight is on the same brand as Roman Reigns. So I do worry that we do they call an audible here and we never get the payoff that they've kept on pushing off, what do they call it? Finishing the story or whatever. And they just decide LA Knight's hotter than Cody.
You want to go, Brian?
Well, yeah. I mean, I'm still not convinced that they're ever going to finish that story. No one can convince me of that. I'm very cynical about it, but I definitely don't think that they should slot in LA Knight ahead of Cody. I think it's a funny thing in wrestling. People talk about the age. Cody is 2 years younger than LA Knight. And yet he definitely is a guy who has way more potential to be the guy who could be the central face of the company. It can carry the company. I think in some ways he already is, to be honest with you, even without the belt. And I think there's the guy that you really want to invest more in long-term than Knight. But I think that again, like I said, it doesn't mean that LA Knight is like out in the cold. I think he could still be in the mix. I think he could work with Rollins or work for that belt. And I do think it could be a situation when we don't have this need to have somebody hold the title for 3 years, that you do have like Cody could get it. Maybe Roman will win it back at some point and hold it a short time, and then maybe Knight will get it. Maybe then it can go back to Cody. Like, you can move it around a little more, where you've got like Cody as the guy and LA Knight as a guy that's in that mix. You know, you could have an Austin Rock situation at some point. Who knows?
Yeah.
I think so as well. I don't think I'm a little bit more optimistic than Brian is towards finish the story of Cody. I'm pretty sure they're gonna finish the story, and Cody has a good track record of sticking up to his principles and giving his word. And I think a couple of years ago, when he was still in AEW, he said that he wanted to wrestle until he was 40. So it's 2 years left, or more or less. We'll see if we'll stick to his word. But so far, it looked like he always did. And so, yeah, that means that probably Cody isn't a long-term champion if he's gonna respect that. But we could move around the title situation a little bit more than what we are used to in the latest few years.
Yeah, absolutely.
So probably, you can have Cody as a champ, then the night that probably Sami Zayn as well will be put in the mix, at least I think. Or
I think Zayn has absolutely plummeted in terms of his stock from earlier this year, and I know people will put it on WWE kind of dropping the ball on booking, but I don't. I mean, I just think it's the reality that Zayn played. It worked in that storyline, but as soon as he broke away from the bloodline and became a babyface, not kind of like the comic sympathetic heel figure in the bloodline, it just doesn't work. And I think he's a terrific worker, but I think he was part of an ensemble that really worked. I think outside of it, I mean, would anybody seriously be talking about Sami Zayn as world champion today?
Well, I think that was another thing that they blew, because I don't think
they did. I think
what they could have done, what they could have done just to get the most out of it and to create a moment, is if they weren't so hung up on this damn title reign never ending. And I'm not saying it should have happened immediately before WrestleMania, but have Sammy beat him in front of that Montreal crowd, especially in hindsight. Now we know that it wasn't going to Cody. Cody wasn't winning it. Have Sammy beat him, and then Roman wins it right back, and he's the champ again. But you gave people that moment. You didn't step on the fans' face and kill their hopes and dreams for no reason. Like, you know what I mean? And that was the moment to do it. Like, I agree with you, Al. You can't really do it now. I think it's past. But that was the moment to do it. He gets it. Oh, my God, I did it. I'm the champ. But then it's part of the bigger story of, like, Roman can't be stopped because then he wins it back. You know what I mean? Like, it could have added to the story, especially if he was not going to lose it to Cody at Mania. But that moment has passed.
Yeah, no, I put some of it on Sammy. Not that he did anything wrong, but even he's talked about it. Even he said in interviews that he doesn't see himself as the guy in WWE, and I think it's just a reality of kind of like the role he played. And sure, you could have done it for a one-off pop in Montreal on one night, but I don't know that that's good wrestling booking. And I also don't know realistically how much people expected that. I mean, it was Roman Reigns should beat Sami Zayn, and he did. And I think it played out just fine because he had, the tag team main event at Night 1 at WrestleMania with him and Kevin Owens. I think that that was a great payoff. I mean, the questionable part again is not putting the title on Cody, but I think all the parts relating to how they played out with the Usos and Owens and Zayn worked out just fine. So I don't have any qualms with that. One last thing here, quickly, John Cena, the other part of this main event this weekend, he's become kind of a regular as of late. I think it has a lot to do with the Hollywood strike, and that's why we've also seen The Rock, and even Dave Bautista has talked about maybe being up for something. But now that we'll see if they all disappear now. But the upside is that we've gotten some John Cena, but also it's weird. It doesn't feel as special as you'd think it would feel. I do feel like that star has diminished a little bit. And I think part of it is, maybe we just need to see Cena in the right circumstance. But when we last saw him at WrestleMania with Theory, it was an underwhelming performance. Cena all but said, not that he's phoning it in, but at this level of his career, look, he's got a certain kind of match, and that's what he's going to do. So it does feel like, as great it is to have John Cena back, what's really interesting is that he appeared on that same episode that The Rock did, and it was so much a difference in star power, right? I mean, like The Rock, it was like, holy crap, this is going to show up like on the evening news that The Rock is on WWE programming.
Yeah, but The Rock is the biggest.
Like, oh yeah, John Cena's there too. That's nice.
But The Rock is the biggest celebrity on the planet. That's right. You can't ever forget that. Like, there's now a whole generations of wrestling fans who don't even remember him as a wrestler. They know him as Dwayne Johnson, the movie star. Like, I learned that harsh lesson teaching high school. Like, when I had students say to me, Dwayne Johnson was a wrestler? Like, for real? No, for real. Yeah. So, I mean, that's part of it.
My girlfriend asks me that every time we go to see The Rock movie.
Yeah.
She's always like, wait, did he wrestle?
but that is part of it. He's a huge star outside wrestling. Cena is a star outside wrestling too, but he's not the biggest star in the world. And the other difference is the reality. This is a fact. Cena was never bigger than The Rock, ever. No. Even though he had a much longer run and all that kind of thing. And he was never bigger than The Rock. The Rock was always a bigger deal and was always going to be a bigger deal coming back than Cena. And I think that's why you saw that happen. I mean, Cena was the last gasp of like what we were talking about, that era of where a star could be bigger than the brand. And he was sort of like, but he was like the diminished return after, Hogan, then to Austin Rock, or, you had Hart and Michaels and who were less. And Cena was like the last gasp of that, but the weakest compared to people like Austin Rock, Hogan,
Yeah, and I think him coming back at this particular time is interesting because sort of sandwiched between The Rock, who I think we all agree was a bigger star than him. But I thought that if you had that Mount Rushmore, I know you hate Mount Rushmores, Brian, but for the sake of argument, if you had that Mount Rushmore, I've long thought that Cena has earned his place on that Mount Rushmore of WWE because he did carry the company for it's 10, 15 years. But now, sort of sandwiched between The Rock and Roman Reigns, who is his successor. And now it's sort of like, John Cena for a long time he's the biggest star since the big stars, since the Austin and
right.
The Rock. And now you've got this comparison against Roman. And I'm starting to wonder, well, did he even mean as much as Roman does now? Is he a notch below Roman?
I was going to say that. I think taking out the Hollywood aspect, I think Cena is definitely more mainstream now than Reigns. Just looking at the WWE side of things and their star power and the level they got to within wrestling itself, I think Roman Reigns has now exceeded Cena in
really?
That.
Yeah.
In my mind, Roman Reigns.
I think the issue is a durability, how long they were on top. And you forget that Cena was on top for a long time. You're talking like 05 to 16, something like that, 17.
But we can't forget that half the audience really... He had go away heat with half the audience. It wasn't so much like Roman Reigns gets booed and catcalled because he's a heel and he's really good at what he does. Half the WWE audience was like, oh my God, with this guy, how long are we going to have to deal with this? That, it's been romanticized now because he's the legend emeritus, but that was a big part of it. And I'm now comfortable saying that I do believe that Roman Reigns is the biggest star that WWE has produced since the Attitude Era. I would say that in my opinion.
Yeah, and some of this, I guess, you could measure. There are metrics that you could look at. What Roman doesn't have yet is, again, the longevity that Cena has, and you forget that a lot of Roman's run as a top guy, he was hated more than Cena was, right? I mean, as a babyface, because at any given time, Cena had the women and the kids, right?
I'm really looking at the last, like the new era Roman Reigns.
The bloodline era, yeah. I mean, Roman has been great. Yeah.
Because he's been there for 11 years now. I mean, he has had a really long run, but These last few years, I think, is when he got over the top to the point where I can say what I said.
Yeah. But it is interesting that, Cena being back, I would have thought it would feel more special than it does. I mean, do you agree with that, Frank?
I think I disagree with Brian here. I don't think The Rock. I don't think that Roman Reigns has surpassed Cena in terms of popularity within wrestling itself. But probably this is more due to me having a different perspective than what you guys have in the US, of course. I speak for Italy mainly, but all around Europe, I think that people still would associate John Cena much more to the word wrestling in general than they do with Roman Reigns. I think a very small portion of the audience here in Europe will know who Roman Reigns is and what is done in the past few years.
But again,
they may know about the Shield, maybe.
But that's also because, like we were saying, Cena had so many more years to build that reputation. But I think, like, when I say what I said, I think it's because I'm looking at what I'm trying to say is, yes, Cena had more longevity. He's going to be a more established name. There's probably plenty of people in this world who know Hulk Hogan more than any of these guys. And that was 40 years ago. But I think, like, right now, where Roman is right now and has been for the past 3 years is bigger than Cena ever was at any given moment in the years that he was there, in my opinion. If that makes sense.
I think that WWE is bigger. I mean,
yes,
WWE
right.
now runs WrestleMania now is always stadium shows. When Cena won the title was in front of 10,000 people or something like that.
It was the basketball arena.
Los Angeles. I cannot remember the name of the arena. But WrestleMania 21. WrestleMania 22, again, was inside of an arena. And so on and so forth. It's only like in really recent time that they started running at least WrestleManias and now SummerSlam 2, it looks like, inside stadiums. So probably it's more the brand, what we said earlier, more the brand WWE that has evolved more than the singular person.
It's because Cena's Italian, isn't it, Frank? Just come around.
Yeah, of course. Giovanni Cena. Yeah, of course.
Well, a good way to end it here. So before we run, Frank, anything you want to promote? Want to tell people about your own podcast where they could follow you?
Oh yeah, my podcast, as I said, at the moment is on hiatus. Fun fact, because the last episode I recorded was before WrestleMania 39, and I predicted that Cody will win. Of course, he will win against Roman, right? And then I was so pissed off afterwards that I said, "Okay, no, I'm not gonna record a new podcast." No, just joking. But I have so much going on. In my professional life, not only just in wrestling, then I don't have time to constantly interview interesting people like you guys. So yeah, at the moment the podcast is on hiatus, but you can still find me on Twitter or whatever you call it now these days, X, whatever, at LMW Podcast.
Excellent. And Brian, you want to tell them about your endeavors? How's the Gorilla book coming along?
Sure. My Gorilla Monsoon book, Irresistible Force, The Life and Times of Gorilla Monsoon, is now I'm proceeding into the writing phase. And I actually got one last interview that I'm lining up with Cowboy Bill Watts, who's one of the last living people who really worked with Gorilla back in the early years of his career in the 60s. So he's someone I really want to talk to. But I've been getting a lot of great interviews. I've talked to like 40 people at this point. And I'm excited to really start putting the text together after months and months of interviews. But that one is probably not going to be out for a while. So, it's going to take at least another year and a half, I think, before it's out on the market. But there's also Blood and Fire, my biography of the Sheik, which is out there, and it's been out there for a while. And there's my podcast, my own podcast, Shut Up and Wrestle, which is at suawpod.com, as well as all the usual podcast places. And I've got an episode coming up with Gary Michael Capetta, which for me is a really big deal. And he's got a lot of great stories and memories. So stuff like that, people will find on my podcast. So I hope they check it out.
Who is your Mount Rushmore of wrestling ring announcers?
All right. when you do these Mount Rushmore things, it's like this because I am as pretentious as it sounds. I'm a wrestling historian and I really do a lot of research and I try to learn about different eras. So it's like you can do a Mount Rushmore of what you yourself have seen and known and as a fan experienced. And then there's the Mount Rushmore as if you really look at it objectively and try to learn who really was the best. You know what I mean? Like in my experience of watching wrestling, the best, I hope Gary doesn't listen to this, the best ring announcer to me is Howard Finkel, the one who was the iconic ring announcer. So he'd have to be up there. Now, because my grandfather was involved with boxing and I know a lot about boxing announcers, and because I've studied wrestling history, Jimmy Lennon is a guy, Jimmy Lennon Sr., who's always talked about as the greatest ring announcer historically in boxing and wrestling. And he used to do all the shows in California. He'd have to be on my list. I don't know. It's tough. Like those two guys, I'm not, I don't know. Can I have like, you really sprung this on me.
We'll revisit.
Yeah, but those two guys for sure. Howard Finkel and Jimmy Lennon Sr. would be two heads on my Mount Rushmore of ring announcers. I could
Gary
tell
Michael
people.
Capetta was great.
Gary Michael Capetta. Okay, I'd put him. He'd be on there for me. And it's not just because I just had him on the show. I loved him. I loved him in WCW. I love him on the old WWF footage I've seen him on. I thought he was terrific. That's the thing. A lot of ring announcers are just there. Like, you know what I mean? Like they don't make themselves stand out, or they make themselves stand out in ways that I don't like. Like I am not a fan. I feel like I'm going crazy, but I do not like Samantha Irvin, and that seems to be like everybody loves her. I don't like her.
Yeah, absolutely.
I don't like the yelling and growling, like the. I don't like that. I don't know.
I think she's terrific. I think she's like so into it. I just love how animated and into it she is.
She is into it. Yes, absolutely,
yeah.
she is.
Yeah, she's great. Yeah. Anyhow, thanks so much, guys. Before we sign off, do want to take care of a little business here. Very much a downer. And save this to the end because Kevin can feel free to cut this out if he doesn't want it. But our boss, our leader, Kevin McElvaney, editor of Pro Wrestling Illustrated, suffered a horrible loss this past week. His wife passed away. She had been sick for some time and not exactly unexpected, something that he and his family had been dealing with for a long time. I think he's addressed this on social media. So I imagine he's okay with us talking about it. Anyhow, we just want to send our love, our condolences to Kevin. Can't imagine what he's been dealing with over the last several months, but certainly the last several days. You know, I think he found out about this the day that the PWI 500 dropped, and getting bombarded with like hate mail about different rankings, and then on the home front to be dealing with this. It's just been, I imagine, an unbearable few weeks for the guy. And I think I can speak for everybody at PWI. We all love Kevin. Kevin's amazing. He's an incredibly compassionate, kind. I think you see it in the direction and the tone of the magazine since he took over from Stu a few years ago, a guy who just feels very deeply and cares about people very much. I think we see that in his dealings with us. And I think he got a lot of that from Megan, who seemed to be even a nicer person, if it's possible, than Kevin was. And I know his North Star and his true love, and it's something that nobody would want to have to face, losing your spouse, but much less at somebody as young as the two of them are. And I'm sure we're counting on many more years together than they got. So it's all to say, not to be that much of a downer, but Kevin, we're thinking about you. We love you. Yes. I'm sure everybody listening to this and reading PWI would say the same. Drop Kevin a line on social media. Let him know that you're thinking about him. That's all for now. Thanks everybody for listening to the PWI podcast, and we will be back soon.